Hello and welcome to the Cyber Safety News Show here on the Safety News YouTube channel. My name is Adam Blue, which each week I will dive into some of the latest cybersecurity news to kind of help you keep informed, but also maybe from it learn how to better protect yourself as you are navigating this cyber world. So for today, the main topic, and it's very interesting, has to do with like a clash between kind of cybersecurity risks and actual physical security risks. And that has to do with drive-thrus. That has to do with ordering food through a drive-thru, handing someone your credit card, and what they could be potentially doing during that kind of physical transaction that would translate into the cyber world. And as I go through that topic, I'll be able to give some pointers on what you can do to kind of get past that. Even some people that were victims of this have kind of their own advice on that. But not only that, if you remember from last week's video, we talked about third-party vendors and how they can pose a risk. Well, there's a new bill that's going to be passed that's going to change requirements made for federal contractors. So hopefully that can trickle down and kind of be a bigger thing for all parties in general, not just federal agencies. And yeah, we might have a few other little bits of information from SIM swapping attacks. That's something I talked about before in a previous episode, but I'll kind of dive into more with that. But let's get started here because I do think this is a very fascinating kind of a thing that has occurred. So this is from TikTok, another one caught taking pictures of cards in the drive-thru. So what seems to be happening is when someone's ordering food through the drive-thru, they get to the window and they're paying with their card. There's some people that are using TikTok that will then flash the card on TikTok. Now, that's pretty interesting because it seems like that can be done so as they're maybe doing a live or just recording something to upload. Whoever's viewing that could take that information, but they could be doing that to save for later, making it look like they're just on TikTok, so not that they're using it in any bad way. I mean, this just kind of reminds me of like when some places that do gambling, like casinos, and they don't want you to have the camera on you. Usually that's for a different reason because some people don't want to be seen, have pictures taken at a casino. But at the same time, you think that would be a security measure for something bigger than that, and it makes me think maybe areas where you are doing transactions, you don't have your camera phone with you, so you can't take pictures of cards. It's very interesting. And then I found some other news articles about this because this is telling me this isn't just an isolated incident. So this is on WAFF 48, 48 on your side, how to protect yourself from potential drive-thru thieves. So local experts believe a viral video on TikTok of a fast food worker flashing her customers' debit cards for the camera is a cause for concern. Auburn University cybersecurity expert Marcus Sachs and Jonathan Kirby of Redstone Federal Credit Union said, "This is evidence that fast food workers can take your card information, then use it to rack up purchases." As recently as this week, police in Decatur announced an arrest for someone they believe took card information from a customer. It's common enough that it's in the news frequently, Sachs said. This problem is the young kids. This is their first job, and they've never really been taught the responsibilities or the implications. And I can kind of see that there. When you get younger, sort of a more immature person that is handling stuff that requires responsibility. I mean, it could be, it's not as nefarious as it seems and don't really understand the implications, so it's good that they brought that up. Sachs said these potential identity thieves can simply record or write down a customer's card information, then use it or sell it on the dark web. So here's one link to the cyber aspect of it, is just the collection of the data to be used to be sold on the dark web. So again, there's that physical transaction of handing someone a card and maybe even copying down the information. But that cyber component is they could sell it on the dark web. There's literally a price for anything, he said. If I can take pictures of credit cards, debit cards, driver's license, passports, or anything that's related to some kind of identity, there's value for that. As for how to protect yourself, both Sachs and Kirby said find other ways to pay at the register. And that's a good point. I'm curious to see what they're going to say because I have my own suggestions as well. Apple Pay and Samsung Pay, those kind of things are much safer than your traditional card, he said. Just be careful when you're setting something up like that. If somebody calls you asking for codes or asking for you to verify things, and that you're very careful who you share your information with. Decide how much you're going to spend on fast food each week. Zach said on Monday going through the ATM line and just withdraw the cash. So Yeah, interesting bringing that up using Apple Pay or Samsung Pay. So there's on your device, you can have it set up where maybe you're paying through that, where they scan it or you tap it. So that's not direct information that a person can copy down. Now, there's other ways to do this as well, and that could be through apps that some of these services have, where you can pay ahead of time on your phone for something and then drive up to the drive-thru to pick it up. That's just a way so you don't have to use your card. And I know this is something that's very common with me, actually, and it has to do with Starbucks. Starbucks has their app. You can go up there daily and get your coffee if you needed, and just use the app and scan. And what's interesting with these apps, and I know Taco Bell does the same thing because I do enjoy some Taco Bell, that you actually gain reward points for using the app. So it's very interesting how they're going in that direction, because I do think using an app, I think, just cuts down on time so they can get to the next person. But inadvertently, that also helps with security, which is a big deal. Yeah, that way you don't have to expose your information. And so here's another one here from, again, another instance of this. I'm convinced I just ordered her Amazon cart. Popeye's customer speculates that worker swiped her card info, says she's only paying with Apple Card from now on. So saying paying with Apple Card, I don't know if they're delineating that from Apple Pay, maybe the card itself, and I believe that's true. The card itself does have some other means of verification that's more secure. So the TikTok creator explains what happened. I was just in the drive-thru at Popeye, so I get this girl one of my other credit cards, right? And she had my credit card so long I am convinced that I just ordered her Amazon card. Okay, so the grammar's a little off because that was a dialogue that's been typed in here, but Rajila, if I'm saying that correctly, goes on to say that in the future, she will only use her Apple credit card when shopping in person. She says that it has a number of safety features, including not displaying the card number on the physical card, which makes stealing information much more difficult. Now I got to go freeze my card, she says, ending the video with a side eye. This isn't the first time a customer has used the social media app to warn viewers about fast food users stealing their information, like one McDonald's customer who caught a worker trying to buy sneakers with her card. Yeah, that's pretty crazy. And you see how that's not as nefarious as selling information on the dark web or trying to get into some super secretive back end of something, of some system. This is really just people doing kind of low-level criminal activity just to steal money, just to buy sneakers. But it's just still as important to keep yourself secure. So I do find it interesting what we're seeing here with drive-thrus or that anything. Doesn't have to be drive-thrus. Anyway, anytime, any place you have to give someone your card and they're taking it to do something, always be careful. Can you see in their view what they're doing? Do you see if they have their phone out, if they're using their phone? Is this going to then regulate use of phones or phones that have cameras on them? Yeah, it's all pretty interesting. And then you got to think, well, then there's stores that do have security cameras in general. Could security cameras also be used in nefarious ways? And they could. So there's a lot going on here, but it looks like through the use of apps or like the Samsung Pay, Apple Pay, that's a way for you to avoid having to expose your information. Okay, and so next up, let's see. House bill would require federal contractors to adopt cyber vulnerability disclosure policy. So this is just another way to further secure, again, information going through third parties and et cetera. So Mace's bill would have contractors specifically follow the VDP guidelines established by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST. NIST. That's something you may have or may not have heard of. And if you have, you probably don't know what it is. And I can't say for sure exactly the exact details of what's in NIST. There's some baseline standards there, but the idea is NIST has these standards to follow. It's kind of like a overarching umbrella approach to being secure and compliant with how you're regulating data. And really what they're doing is here with this bill is making it where it is required that these contractors, third-party agencies follow these. And I think this is important, especially considering what we talked about in the previous video about through third parties using vendors, contractors, information can leak that way because you don't know how secure or what regulations are being followed by these third parties. I think this is a good step in the right direction, especially if it trickles down outside of federal and being across the board. I mean, there already is kind of a standard set for that, especially in some places like GDPR, for instance, or the California Act, where there's some data that is specific to certain areas. So even if where you're operating out of, there isn't a lot of requirements, if you're handling data from a specific area, then you are responsible for that. So very interesting that they're going through with that. Again, more bills to kind of keep people responsible for meeting specific guidelines only helps. But here we go. Kroll suffers data breach. Employee falls victim to SIM swapping attack. So this is something that seems very advanced that we don't hear of too much, but it actually does happen. So risk and financial advisory solutions provider Kroll on Friday disclosed that one of its employees fell victim to a highly sophisticated SIM swapping attack. The incident, which took place on August 19th, 2023, targeted the employee's T-Mobile account, the company said. Specifically, T-Mobile, without any authority from or contact with Kroll or its employees, transferred that employee's phone number to the threat actor's phone at their request. Oh, so that's very interesting. So T-Mobile, or any telecom company, has the means of transferring data between SIM cards, which contains the data that allows you to use your phone with an associated number. This enabled the identified actor to gain access to certain files containing personal information of bankruptcy claimants in the matters of Block, FI, FTX, and Genesis. Ooh, that's pretty big. SIM swapping, aka SIM splitting or SIM jacking, while generally a benign process, could be exploited by threat actors to fraudulently activate a SIM card under their control with a victim's phone number. This makes it possible to intercept SMS messages and voice calls and receive MFA-related messages that control access to online accounts. So this is something that we've talked about in a previous video where even though you want to use another device or another app to sort of intercept as that security verification, that can still be a risky move depending on what you're using. So let's see, fraudsters accomplish this by often using phishing or social media to collect personal information about their targets, such as birthdays, mother's maiden names, and the high schools they went to, so they can convince the cellular carrier to port the victim's phone numbers to one of their own SIM cards. So look at how the chain of events are being used. They are just going online where there's some information about people. You get enough of it, then you can use that to get through verification on other services, especially services that may be holding on to some very, very important information, like the phone numbers here. That way that they can intercept the MFA on a different SIM card, the one that they asked it to be transferred to, and be able to then get into an account that way for whatever the bigger thing is. It's not that person they're targeting that they're trying to steal from. That's the means to get to the bigger fish. So in a situation like this is where even Microsoft recommends using like an app where it displays a number and then you put it in on the screen or whatever the prompt is. It's not going through the cellular data, but just the account you're logged in with Wi-Fi. Now, or over the internet and data. And it could be that a next sophisticated step would be hacking, getting control of those apps. But those apps with those MFA codes are usually device specific. So it's going to look at the device you're on and say, well, you might have transferred the number over here, but this device wasn't authorized to use that. So yeah, very interesting actually how so easily on a device you can still get hacked not knowing the vulnerabilities present with certain means, like data over using a telephone number. That number itself, if you can intercept where that data is coming from, you can hack into that. But the device itself, unless it's stolen and then you also have the biometrics to get in, it's a pretty good way to use it. And another one is that's also hardware is one of those hardware tokens that you can plug in through a USB port. And when you're verifying, you type in a PIN, touch the code or the key card, or there's different ways to do it that can get you in. Sometimes it seems like there's a lot of roadblocks or barriers to get over, but at the end of the day, it's worth it because you are not only protecting yourself, but not being held responsible for your lack of security that got into maybe a business you work at or maybe a family member. So something to keep in mind. So I find this to be a very interesting week, how we're seeing the combination of the physical and the cyber. These bad actors are using that together in order to get your data, and that could be as simple as thieves just wanting to buy sneakers or selling data on the dark web. So thanks for watching this week's episode. Hope you enjoy it. Please leave some comments if you have any follow-up information or other things to look into that I can read in the cybersecurity world. And if you haven't, please subscribe. I enjoy doing this, and this has been a lot of fun for me, so liking will also help tell the rest of the world that. But anyway, guys, thanks for watching. We'll talk later.